Hello Toolmasters members, I want to welcome you to the very first Fusion 360 course here on TMA. I want to give a big, huge, hearty thank you to Ben Brandt for instructing these courses. These courses will last 6 weeks, 1 hour every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Central. And this is a recording, so if you missed the live class, we're recording each class, and the recordings will come up on the website the next day or within 48 hours of the class itself. So you'll be able to come back and reference the material. If you sat through the course and you had some more questions or missed a part, you can come back and reference that. Or if you happen to miss the course itself, you can come back and watch it and learn how to use Fusion 360. So once again, Ben Brandt, thank you very much. We're already underway and we're going to jump into it right now.
It seems like a solid business model that's getting a lot of people into it and using it and improving it. So yeah, obviously it's catching on, and all of you are excited about it, and that's great. So I'm glad you're here. So we're gonna take you through some basics of what's in the program tonight and try to do a little bit of modeling, so we have something to show for tonight. We're going to try to keep this to about an hour each week, so it'll be 6 weeks, every Wednesday night, and so we want to get some good material in, but we don't want to overload everybody or drag it out too long either, so we'll try to be respectful of everyone's time. So I don't know, I kind of want to get a sense from the group of what kind of CAD experience some of you have. I know we've got some beginners in here. Have you worked with AutoCAD or Fusion 360 or anything? Maybe throw something in the chat to say, what sort of what your experience level is, or kind of where you're coming from. And we can talk about that more later. But and I guess something else to think about, as we're going along here. What do you hope to get out of this class? I've got some rough ideas planned for what we'll cover, but you can certainly change that a bit to fit what you guys are looking for, or if you got a particular modeling project in mind or something you'd like to see, we can do that here. I want to stress that we want this to sort of be fluid, so if there's something I can show you guys, that's great. I don't want to just follow a strict curriculum, otherwise you can get that same stuff by watching a video on YouTube. So the advantage of everyone being here tonight is that we can sort of make it what we want it to be. So yeah, I guess, so let's see. Just glancing at the chat here. Okay, so got some beginners, people who've played with it a bit. I see a very small chat window. Mike's got an X-Carve. So we'll be looking at more of the modeling, drawings, assemblies. Probably won't get into too much of the actual physical output like 3D printers or CNC machines. I don't have either of those pieces of equipment yet, so I can't really speak to that, but that may come down the road in an advanced class. So I don't know. Izzy, have you seen anything go by in the chat that's worth commenting on here before we really get into it?
I think we should just jump in, Ben. We're good to go if you want to start.
All right.
Just do I guess walk through the tool.
Very good.
There's a lot. Looks like we have a lot of beginners today. So, and then
great.
A couple of guys that should be probably teaching the class.
It's all right. I got to get some people to keep me on my toes. Yeah. So somebody asked just before we kind of got started here how much the software costs. Probably most of you are aware that is basically free, as long as you are making less than $100,000 a year. It is free for these small companies, individuals, students. So that's part of what makes it so easy to get into. So yeah, and if you haven't already, you can Google Fusion 360. You can get it through Autodesk, but it's pretty easy to find. Autodesk.com, Fusion 360. But once you've gotten to this point where you've got the software up, this is sort of the blank workspace that everybody sees the first time they open Fusion. And you've got some toolbars across the top, which we'll get into. First thing I want to show is at the very top left corner of the screen, you'll see there's a little grid here, 3x3 grid button. That's called the data panel. So if I click on that, the data panel slides out. And I've got my account here with Fusion 360. This is my username up at the top. And down here you can set up projects. That's where you're going to put all your various 3D models, things you're working on. You can upload other stuff into these. They're like folders. And all of this is stored remotely in the cloud, as they say. So it's up on a server on the internet, one of Autodesk's servers. And so all your data is stored up there. You can save it locally to your machine. I think it does that automatically and syncs it up to the cloud. But there's some really nice advantages that gives you. You don't have to worry about losing your data if your hard drive fails. You can access it from anywhere. It's easy to share on the internet. I have a Fusion 360 app on my phone, so if I want to show somebody a model I'm working on, I can pull it up on my phone. And they do some interesting things with tracking revisions of every time you save a file. We typically don't get that deep into it, but at any rate, that's sort of the model that they're working with, is all of your stuff is stored remotely up on the internet, so you can access it from anywhere. I can run Fusion 360 at home, I can run Fusion 360 at work, and as long as I log in with the same credentials, I can work on my stuff from 2 different locations. So first thing we'll do here, before we even make something new, I want to talk about how to navigate around. So in this data panel on the left-hand side, if you scroll to the bottom, you'll probably see there's a section here called Samples. And I just want to open something up just to demonstrate a couple of things. So right here, I would assume everybody has this. There's a basic training project in the list towards the bottom. And if you double-click that, these are some of the models that Autodesk makes available to support some of the stuff that the tutorials that they have. If I click on like this folder here, Introduction, get that model to come. Oh, maybe not. Stand by. Here, let's go to 4, Modeling. I'm just going to get a model up on my screen. Here we go. Here's some models I can open. We'll open this canoe here. I want to talk about how you just sort of navigate around a model, and I don't want you all to have to create a model first to get this. All right, so I've got a 3D model up in front of me, but I want to be able to move it around, work with it, look at it from different angles, zoom in on different parts, and there's different keyboard controls to do that. Before we even get into that, well, I'll show you where you set them. On the top right corner, I've clicked on this menu here. It's got my username in it. But I scroll down to Preferences and click that. And the first screen of preferences that comes up here is just the general preferences. And you'll see towards the bottom here, there's one that says Pan, Zoom, and Orbit Shortcuts. Now, if you've come from a different CAD package and you're used to certain mouse button controls for moving around your model, you can pick that profile that you're used to. So I personally prefer the SolidWorks buttons and keystrokes. This is just for panning, zooming, and orbiting your model and turning around in front of you. I'll talk about the Fusion one first because that's the default that you probably all have set. So if I click OK on this Pan, Zoom, Orbit for Fusion. Now, what I did there is that just sets how you pan around, and I believe, no, if I So if you've got a mouse here with the center scroll wheel, you actually push down on that. So if I push down and then move around, I'm just panning it side to side, up and down, but I'm still looking at my canoe from the same angle. If I want to zoom in on something, I use the scroll wheel by turning it up and down. And then I can zoom in on some little detail here. And wherever my mouse pointer is on the model, that's where it'll zoom in. So like right in here, I'm on this little corner. I zoom in, that's what it zooms up on. But if I zoom out and I want to look at the back of the canoe, I just put my mouse pointer up near the back, and that's where the zooming centers around. And I'm just scrolling the wheel on my mouse. Now in the Fusion control set, if I want to rotate this around, I actually have to go over to my keyboard and push the Shift key. One thing I'll point out, if you haven't noticed already, down in the bottom right corner of my screen, I've got a program running that's showing all of my keystrokes and mouse clicks. So right now I'm pressing the Shift key. You can see it says Shift down there, so if you're never not 100% clear what I just pushed, that will show on the screen. So if I hold Shift and, let's see, oops. If I hold Shift and I press the middle mouse wheel down, then it orbits around. So panning is just the center mouse button. So side to side, up and down. Shift and the center mouse button lets me rotate it around and look at it from different angles. And then scrolling up and down is your zoom. I'm going to go back into my preferences here. So I go up in the menu in the top right, go down to Preferences. You can also reverse the zoom direction. So if scrolling up and scrolling down feels strange to you or feels backwards, you can check this box or uncheck this box to make the zoom different. Now I'm going to switch back to the SolidWorks profile for pan, zoom, and orbit. This is just my personal preference. I don't like to have to move over to the keyboard too much just to change how I'm looking at things. So if I set this to SolidWorks, what that changes here is I still can scroll the wheel up and down to zoom, which is pretty intuitive. But now, just by pushing the center mouse button, I can rotate it around. And in my mind, this gives me easier access to the whole model. So if I don't really use panning hardly at all. It's pretty much just rotate it around and then zoom in on whatever I want to look at. And if I want to look at something else, I zoom out, zoom in somewhere else, rotate it around. So for me, rotating and zooming is more than enough. And then that rare occasion, if I want to pan, that's when I use the Shift key to do it. Oops. Oh, I think I clicked something wrong here. Oh, there we go. It's Control and Center button. But if you see me zipping around, I'm probably, rotating it, finding a place to look, and zooming in. So that'll be useful to know as we're sort of moving around our 3D model. Regarding the way we're viewing it, if you look at the top right corner of your workspace here, you have what's called the View Cube. And it looks like a cube, and you can see it's labeled here, top, there's the front, there's the right. This home button will always take you back to sort of a default view where you can see the top, front, and right. And you can also just take that view cube and kind of click and drag it around. I see somebody asks, does this work with a 3D mouse? I believe it does. I know there's some fancier mice. I'm just using a pretty standard one, but I can't really speak to that specifically. So that's how we move around.
Ben, I can answer that. I use a small Space Mouse, and
Yep, I've heard of that one.
it does work with Space Mouse, but you have to. There's a little bit of messing around. It doesn't just automatically work like with SketchUp or something. You have to mess around a little bit to get it to function in there, and so you can. Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay. Just a couple other things while I've got this canoe model open. The left, so here, that whole data panel where all your files are, you don't have to keep that open on your screen. You can either close it with the X here or click the button for it again, and it gets it out of your way. On the left-hand side is what's called your browser, and this is sort of like a hierarchy of everything that's going on in your model. So you can expand these things out, see the various sketches and bodies, and we'll talk about that a bit later. So everything that goes into your model is sort of built out under this browser on the left. Down on the bottom left of the screen here, you'll see a line of all these icons here. This is what's called the timeline. And this is one of the biggest, I think, the best parts about Fusion 360 and just parametric modeling in general. That's the style of 3D modeling that it works in, is this is like a historical record of everything you've done to build your model up to this point. And once we get into modeling something, I'll show you more about how this works, but it's really easy to go back and make changes or sort of rearrange the order that you want to make things. So it's almost like unlimited undo, and you can go back and change any aspect of the model, kind of go back in time and then roll it back forward. So we've got the timeline on the bottom, browser on the left-hand side, tools across the top. And you can see there's icons up here. These are buttons for different things that we'll be using. And then underneath each one, you can see here Sketch has a long menu of items, Create, Modify. The things here that have letters next to them, those are keyboard shortcuts. If you get used to certain keyboard shortcuts, those can be really handy. And if there's a function that you like, that you use a lot, and you want the button up in the toolbar, as I hover over something in the menu here, like here, drawing a 2-point rectangle, oh, it's already up there. If I see something in the menu I want up in the toolbar, this little up arrow here, if I hover over, it says Add to Toolbar. So I can click that, and now this 2-point rectangle menu item is up here in the toolbar, so I can just click on it. So as you sort of get familiar with things and there's certain functions you want to use a lot, you can just throw them up in the toolbar to make them easier to find. All right, so enough tour of the app. Back on the top left, I'm going to open up my data panel, and that'll slide out. And right now I'm still down in this basic training folder. If I do click this left caret, this left arrow, it'll bring me back to my project list. I've got a bunch of projects here for other stuff. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Izzy.
Drew asks, he's having problem viewing the canoe. I'm going to read it verbatim. I have a great background color, and Ben is white. I get a glimpse of parts of the canoe when I roll my mouse pointer over the canoe. He's asking for suggestions on settings.
Oh, so on your screen, you only see parts of the canoe as you roll your mouse over it. Okay, if I'm understanding that correctly. Normally I wouldn't know what you're talking about, but I actually dealt with this a week or two ago. It's probably bad news. So I have another PC I have set up in my shop in the basement, and it's a bit of an older machine, and the graphics, the 3D graphics capability just wasn't quite up to par. So it wouldn't draw everything, but when I would mouse over it like I am here on mine, I could see the lines and the faces kind of highlighting, but nothing else. In that case, there wasn't a whole lot I could do about it. I actually ended up putting in a better graphics card because Fusion, I believe, recommends you have a graphics card or 3D graphics capability on your motherboard with at least, I think, 512 megabytes of memory for graphics. So it's probably, my best guess is it might be a hardware issue. You can tweak, here on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, there's a little gear icon. Oh, nope, sorry. No, it's back up in Preferences, I want to say. There's a graphics section, and you can play around with some of the graphics settings, like, let's see here. Okay, I apologize. I'm not finding exactly what I was expecting, but one of the things it told me is it popped up a bar. It says, you know, your graphics don't seem to be performing as well. Click here to tweak your settings, and you can turn on certain 3D graphics effects or turn off certain effects to hopefully make it a bit easier for your computer to handle. So hopefully you can find a solution there. You might have to find another machine with a bit more graphics capability, but that's about as much as I can say to that right now. I don't want to
Let's
get too far into it, but yeah. Thanks, Izzy, and the guys here. All right, so back to the data panel on the left here. There's a blue button here that says New Project. So we'll click that, and it just creates a new box at the top. I'm going to call this Toolmasters Association TMA Fusion. And basically that's just a folder. And it's showed up down in my list here in alphabetical order, but this is a project that I'm going to be using a lot, especially for this class. So there's a little pin button here. I can click that. And by pinning it, it's now up in the top of my list, so it's easier for me to find. So on my TMA Fusion project, I'll double-click that. And it says TMA Fusion at the top here, and basically it's a blank slate. I haven't put anything there. I'm going to close the Canoe model. So here, up here in the tab, it says Canoe. Click the X to close it out. And by default, it's opened a new untitled model in front of me. And you click Save, and what we're going to model tonight, hopefully we can fit this in, is a light switch plate. Pretty simple thing that most folks are familiar with. It's got a few good getting started features in it. So we're going to call this light switch plate. And we'll click Save. It's saying you want to save it in the TMA Fusion folder. This master thing I won't really talk about. It's kind of a new feature, but just accept that that's what we want to do. Click Save. And now Fusion can do a certain amount of auto-saving in the background. So if your computer crashed, you wouldn't lose everything. And I'm going to close the data panel just to get that out of my way. Now when you're modeling stuff in Fusion, just about everything starts out with what's called a sketch. So there's nothing here in front of me. I do, in my browser, I have this folder, looks like a folder here, it says Origin. If I expand that out, there's a little light bulb next to it, and it's blue, that means it's turned off. If I turn that on, I click on it, turns yellow, now all of a sudden all that stuff is visible, and what's in here is these flat planes. So this is like your front plane, your top plane, your right side plane. So just think of like a sheet of paper, flat surface, and then some axes, and then this center point is your 0 point. Think of like coordinates. It's your center of everything. It gives you a place to start. I'm going to collapse that origin back down. And first things first, what the Fusion community calls their rule number 1 is if we're ever in doubt, create what's called a new component. So if I go to my browser here where it says light switch plate at the very top level, I can right click on it and choose new component. And a component is sort of the logical grouping every piece in your model should fall under a component. Then you can sort of edit it and manipulate it and work on it independently from everything else that might be going on in your 3D model. And it's always helpful to give things names. So I'll just call it plate, light switch plate, whatever you want to call it. I can click on the name here and type in something new. Switch plate. And then the other thing here is next to the component there's a little round button here that's got a circle in it. That means it's activated. And so when something is activated, that's what we're working on at the moment. That'll become more apparent later when you have more parts in an assembly, you want to activate the one you're working on. So I've got my switch plate component here. There's nothing underneath it. It has its own origin, but anyway, switch plate. So up in the toolbar, up at the top here, there's the sketch section, this little icon that looks like a paper on a paper with a pencil. It's create sketch. So I'm going to click create sketch, and really think of a sketch, it's just like you would a sketch on paper. It's a drawing on something flat. So we're going to draw on something flat, and that happens to be one of these planes. So like if I ever kind of lose track of what I'm looking at, I look at the view cube in the top right. This one says front, so I pick this sort of same plane here that matches up. It says select a plane or face. I click on that, and now the whole viewport just sort of turned, so I'm looking directly at that plane, and I can start sketching. And it always helps to just sketch, keep your sketches as simple as possible, and sort of break up each thing into as small, small changes as possible. So I could sketch out this entire switch plate and the holes and everything, but I'm not going to do that. If you can keep things simpler at each step, that's best. So going up to the toolbar here, I'm going to see the icon for the rectangle, 2-point rectangle, or I can pull down the menu under sketch and go to rectangle, 2-point rectangle, and click on that. And just start drawing my rectangle. I'm going to start on the origin here, this little circle at the center to give as a place to start from. I click there, and I'm not holding the mouse button right now, but I'm just dragging it up to about rough size. I don't actually know what the size is at this point, but I've got a rectangle in front of me. But we have to tell Fusion how big it is. I've got some digital calipers here. If you could look up the dimensions online or look at a drawing if you're trying to replicate something. So this is about 3.2 inches. So to tell my sketch exactly how big this should be, we have to go under the sketch menu here in the toolbar. Nope. Forgive me. Let's see. Sketch. Oh, there we go. Way towards the bottom here it says sketch dimension. If I pick sketch dimension, keyboard shortcut is also D. That's probably one you'll use a lot. But I pick sketch dimension. Here, I'll even click add to toolbar because we'll use that a lot. Sketch dimension, and now I just click on one of the sides of my rectangle. We'll click the top here. So I've just clicked it, and now again, I'm not dragging it, or I'm not holding the mouse button. Kind of drag it up above the rectangle so I can see it better. And what did I say that was? About 3.1 inches. So I type on my keyboard now, it's got it highlighted, 3.1, and hit enter. And now that's got a width. And I can start doing the same thing now. I'm still, there we go, click on sketch dimension or pick it down here or push D. And I hover over and click the right side of my rectangle. And click out here again, and we'll give it a height, and that is, call that 5 inches. Now, that sketch has just gotten too big to fit on my screen, so I'm going to hit my scroll wheel and zoom it out a little bit. That looks good to me. And this window on the right-hand side here, it says Sketch Palette. There's some other stuff we can use here, but we're not going to right now. Down at the bottom, I'll click Stop Sketch. And now we're kind of back in the 3D space. Again, this isn't fitting on my screen now, so I'll scroll wheel, zoom out a bit. And now to turn this sketch into something 3D, we're going to extrude it. Most of the stuff you're going to create in basic models, you will create a two-dimensional sketch and then extrude it out to give it some depth. So under the Create section, I want to create some geometry from this. I'll go down and pick Extrude. That's also up in the toolbar here, this little prism here with the arrow next to it. Click Extrude. And we've got this window out in the top right here. It says Extrude. Profile, select. This little select box is blue. That means it's waiting for me to select something. So I'll click on my rectangle. If I hover over it, it kind of lights up. That means I can extrude it. I click on that, and I've got an arrow here. I can extrude it. So I'm just clicking and dragging that arrow outward to give it some thickness. I can also drag it the other direction. So we'll say that's a 1/4 inch, so 0.25. I hit enter. And we've just got, you know, a big, thick rectangle. Now, like I said, I could have sketched out all the features on there, but now this helps keep it simple.
Hey Ben, can we stop for a quick second and answer a couple questions?
Yes.
Is this a good?
Of course. I kind of got on a roll here, so feel free to interrupt me, Izzy.
I'm sorry. No, I didn't want to. I was hoping to find a good spot. This looks like a good spot.
Sure.
Christopher asks, if your dimensions are in millimeters, can you still type in 3.1 inches, IN, for inches?
Absolutely.
And you can do it the other way too, can't you? If you're working in it, you want a millimeter measurement, you can type in MM after the measurement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You can set your default units and preferences, I believe, and it shows here in my model here, in the browser, the third thing down, it shows units, inches. Down in the timeline at the bottom here, you can see there's two icons, and you see the little extrude icon, and then the first one here is that sketch. I can right-click on that and say, there we go, edit sketch. And I can get back in here, and yes, you can absolutely do millimeters. I'm not even sure what, let's see, that's probably about 80, and then you just hit space, mm. And it's showing it to me in inches because that's the units my model is in. But yeah, if you have something that you know, you want it to be exactly so many millimeters, you can just type it in directly, and it'll keep it straight. It'll show it at the proper size.
All right, I think you just answered a second question, which was, where was stop sketch at?
Okay. When you're editing a sketch, there should be this window on the right-hand side that says Sketch Palette. It might be collapsed, so you would just see this little bar, little tab on the right-hand side of the screen. You can click the arrows to expand it. But it is down at the bottom of that window here. So you look in the bottom right corner of my screen, it says Stop Sketch.
All right. Looks like preference in default unit. Does it matter what side of, excuse me, does it matter what side you pull the depth from? Does it change the face side?
It doesn't really matter.
Sorry.
Like, well, yeah, when I did the extrude, so there's another good example of the timeline here. In my timeline, you can see I'm hovering over the extrude feature. I'll right-click on that and say, oh, it didn't, it's disabled there. Let me right-click again. There we go. Edit feature. So now I'm editing that extrude operation. So like I think based on the geometry, like it figures out which way is positive and negative, but like I just clicked and started dragging, and I could have done it that way or typed it in. You can see here it's 1 inch. If I drag back the other way, now it's 0 thickness, and go backwards, now it shows it as -1 inch. It doesn't really have any effect on your 3D model, but maybe for some reason you want your model's origin point to be on the front face versus now it's on the back face. This will come more into play when we're cutting out holes and things and we want to extrude into a solid body to cut a hole or a pocket.
Okay.
But yeah, you can go either direction.
All right. Thank you, Ben. We're good.
All right. So more extruding. So I got my rectangle here. And next step is I'm going to create another sketch. So open the toolbar, click Create Sketch. Now it wants to know where do I want to draw this drawing. And I'm not using my origin planes anymore. And actually, up in the left here, I'm going to click the light bulb next to origin because I don't want to see those anymore, just because that's some visual clutter. Oh, well, I still see them right now because it's asking me to pick a sketch. But anyway, so I'm going to click on the front face of my rectangle, and now it's kind of reoriented the view so I can draw on it. So I'm going to create another rectangle, and I'm purposely just going to throw it in the middle here. It's not centered or anything. And I'm going to add a dimension to it. So we'll give that a width of, let's say, 0.45. Not that this has to be perfectly accurate. And a height. Give this a dimension. Click on the left or right-hand side of this rectangle. Say that's 0.95 inches. And just to get it roughed in, so it's obviously not centered here. I can click and drag any piece of my sketch, or click and drag one of the lines, for example, and it moves it around because it's not constrained. I haven't told it enough information that it knows exactly where this should be. I can leave it this way if I want. I don't have to constrain it to a specific spot, but that's sort of a clue to help tell me that I haven't provided enough information for the model. So I'll create another dimension, and now I will click the top edge of this rectangle, and then I'll click the top edge of my switch plate, and that line lights up, and now that became a distance measurement. And some of you are probably wondering, why can't I make that centered? And I can, but I'm doing this the bad way here just to demonstrate a point. So that's about 2 inches down from the top, about roughly 1.4 inches from the left side. So we'll do another dimension. And I click on the side of my hole and the side of my plate. And now I can click to place it out here. And that was about 1.4 or so. I can tell that's off center, 1.35. Any dimension, I can double click it and change the number if I want. And now if I click and drag any piece of my sketch, it doesn't move. That means I've fully constrained it. I've told it where it has to be exactly. So I'll click Stop Sketch. And I'm going to extrude it. So under Create, we say Extrude, and it's saying what profile do you want to extrude? It's waiting for me to select it. So I can go around here and I say I want to extrude this hole. Zoom in a bit here, rotate it around, and instead of extruding out, I'm going to click and drag that arrow backwards through the part. And you can see it's kind of turned red here, and in our extrude window down at the bottom, the operation is now set to cut, because it figured out that going into the part was cutting something away. You can play around with different options here or set it to join, and then it becomes a solid piece, but we're going to cut that hole out. And I drug it over 0.7 inches. You can do it to a distance, or under extent it says up to an object or through all. So we're going to go through all, because I don't care how thick this thing is. I want the hole to go through everything, so I don't have to worry about a depth. So I just say go through everything, do a cut, click OK, and we've got that hole. Now, we're going to modify this a bit here in the Modify section of the toolbar, and we're going to give it some rounded edges. So that tool here is called Fillet. I've heard some people mistakenly call it Fillet. That's only for meat and fish. If we're 3D modeling, it's pronounced Fillet. So we'll click on that Fillet feature to round over the front edges, because this is looking a little boxy. So I click on Fillet. Now you see a similar box to what we had with Extrude. You have some things to do. It says Edges, Select. It's asking me to pick what I want to round over. So I can just go around and start clicking. I'll click the top edge, and the left edge, bottom edge, and the right edge. And you can see here it says 4 selected. And then I have to give it a radius. How much radius do I want on this curved edge? And I've got this arrow again, like we had with Extrude. I can click and drag it to kind of get the radius I want, or I can type it in. So there's a little text box here that showed up next to the arrow, or there's one up in the window here. We're going to give that 1/4 inch, 0.25 inches. Click OK.
John asked, does the order of edges matter?
Not necessarily the order of edges, but if you have like a really complicated, a lot of intersecting edges on some really crazy geometry, if you try to fillet everything at once, sometimes Fusion has trouble deciding how to do the curvature where some of those edges meet. So sometimes you want to just fillet one sort of feature at a time, or one group of edges at a time. I don't have a good example of that here, but yeah, if Fusion has trouble with it, it'll show a warning and say, and you can go back and sort of revise how you did it. Now, before we get too far, so we've got my light switch here, and maybe I've got some big dreams of making the world's best light switch plate, and I don't like the standard size. I want to change it. So we've got our timeline here, and I've gotten this far and I decide I want to make it bigger. I can roll back, and if I know which sketch it was, I can click that sketch and edit it from here, or under my switch plate I can start expanding out these sections here. So under switch plate component I've got sketches, and I can, these sketches are turned off. They have the light bulb switched off. I can click on that one. That was my first sketch. I know that's the one I made the overall size. So I'm going to right click on that sketch and say Edit Sketch. And now this brings us back to where we started. So I can double click any of these dimensions. So let's change the 5-inch height to 6 inches, and the width to, I don't know, 3.5. That's a light switch plate that's going to change the world. So it's unique, right? All right, stop sketch. But now our hole looks funny, because when we sketched out that feature, I can get it from the timeline here, right click, and edit sketch. I dimensioned it from the top and the left-hand side, which was technically correct at the time, but it didn't really express what I was intending to do. So not everything has to be done with just dimensions. I can click on one of these dimensions here, the side one, and click push the delete key, and click this dimension so it's highlighted in blue, and press delete. And now this thing is free floating again. Matter of fact, I'm just going to drag this over here and do some more. I'm going to redraw, and then I'll eventually delete this here. I'm just keeping it here so I remember the dimensions. I'm going to go up to Sketch, and I'm going to just draw a line tool. And as I hover over the corner, you can see this little blue square that shows up. That means it's kind of snapping to the corner of my switch plate. So I'll draw a line from corner to corner. And it's a solid line, so that could actually be used for geometry, but this is just sort of like a reference for me, and you'll see where I'm going here in a second. If I click on that line, it's highlighted blue. Over in the sketch palette window, it's floating on the right-hand side here. First thing here is says normal or construction. I click this button, or I hit the X key, and it turns this into a dotted line. That dotted line is basically there just for your own reference. You can't extrude that into a shape. Now, up in the sketch section here, I'll pick rectangle, and this time I'm going to pick one called center rectangle, which is how it sounds. Instead of drawing a rectangle from point to point, I'm going to draw it from the center out. And as I move over this construction line I just made, if I get close to the center, it's a little hard to see, but there's a little triangle, a little blue triangle. That is a symbol for a midpoint. You'll see it over here in the sketch palette here. Midpoint is the triangle. If I sort of snap to the middle of my construction line, click, now I'm drawing a centered rectangle which is snapped into the middle of our switch plate. I can just sort of click and drag around here. And you can see I've got a couple text boxes already up on the screen with numbers in them, so I can start typing in 0.45, hit enter. Oops. I should have hit tab to jump to the next dimension. So we'll go click sketch dimension, give this thing a height of 0.95. But now all I've told it is that this hole is this wide and this tall, and I've used these construction lines and this sort of midpoint constraint to tell it I want this to be in the very middle. I'll drag a box around. Let's see. There we go. I'll click this rectangle. Oh, that's right. I was in the dimension tool, and now I'm drawing a new dimension. One of the handiest keys you'll use is the escape key. Sometimes you'll accidentally be stuck in the dimension tool or some other tool and you don't want to be, or you want to just sort of exit out of something. Hit escape. I like to hit it lots of times just for good measure. Now I can draw a box around this, push delete. And now I've got a new sketch here that's perfectly centered on my switch plate. So we'll hit stop sketch. And it still looks off, but down in my timeline here, this extrusion is marked in yellow. It doesn't like me. It's because the original rectangle that I extruded through is gone, so Fusion doesn't know which shape I'm supposed to cut out. Now if I hover over that yellow mark in my timeline, there we go, right click, edit feature. Now up in the profile it says, hey, it's missing a profile. It doesn't know which shape to cut out. So now I can click on my new cutout, and it still remembers that I wanted to extrude through all, make it a cut. So that was our extrusion we did before. I just changed it a little bit there. Now it's perfectly centered, and I'm going to quickly I saw Chad put his arms up in the air. I'm hoping I didn't There's not something I'm missing. But if I change the width now to, say, 4 inches and the height to something else, it's still centered because I already told it that relationship. So you can go back and change stuff pretty easily. Now, not everything has to be a sketch that you extrude. So this switch plate should be sort of like a shell. It's not solid all the way through. It's about a 1/4 inch thick piece of plastic. Under Modify menu, there are some common 3D stuff you can do here. So under Modify, we'll pick Shell. And I get this same familiar window here. Now it says, select the faces in the body that you want to make a shell of. So I got to pick this back face, and you can see there's an arrow going in there of which direction it's going to shell out the part, and it wants to know how thick the shell should be, and this will make sense in just a second. So we'll say 0.050, so 50 thousandths of an inch. Or I can type that in as a fraction. I can say 1/16, that's a 1/16 of an inch, and hit enter. Now I've got a shell, but this hole in the center doesn't have a little rim around it. Now, in something like SketchUp, I would have to go in here and pick this surface and cut it away. But I can rearrange the order in which I've done things. So this shell is sitting out here in the end of my timeline. The extrude for this hole is back here. I can, let's see, this little insertion point here, the triangle on the line, I can click and drag that and kind of go back in time. Now you can still see the shell and the stuff is still here on the end of the timeline, but it's just not showing. It's showing me what it looked like back here. I'll go back one more before the sketch of the hole. And the shell, I can click that. Oh, sorry, I can't because I've gone back in time. Apologize if I'm losing some of you. I'll drag this insertion point here in my timeline back up to the end. And now my shell operation, I can click and drag it backwards right after that. Oh, shoot. Sorry. First things first, the fillet, the rounded corners. I can click and drag that back. So now technically the fillet happened right after I made my rectangle. And we'll grab the shell and drag that back right after the fillet. Now what just happened here, I'll take my point in time in the timeline, this insertion point here, and click and drag it over, get rid of our hole. So I've just rearranged the order in which things were done on the model. So we made a rectangle, we rounded the corners, and then we carved out a shell at this point. So now that front face is flat like we would expect, and now we're coming in and cutting out this hole. So this looks right. I didn't have to resketch anything. I just had to rearrange the order in which stuff was done. And we're getting close to an hour here, but that's good. I only got basically a couple other things to show you to get this model done. We're going to create another sketch. So I go Sketch menu, Create Sketch, click the Create Sketch button. Where do I want to create that sketch? On the front face. Oh, hold on. What did I do wrong there? Create Sketch. There we go. Clicked on the front face. Now we'll sketch some holes. And I am going to sketch a line. Let's see here. From the center, so I kind of hover over the center of our hole, the little triangle shows up. To the center of this line, another triangle shows up there. Now I'm still in the line tool, so I'm going to hit escape. And I'll click on that line. And in the sketch palette, we turn that into a construction line. So that's just sort of a center point reference. And I'm going to draw a circle. Center diameter circle. So under sketch, circle, center diameter circle. And like if I hover over this construction line, I can kind of drag it up slowly, and that line extends itself. I'm sort of hinting that I want my circle to be in line with that line. I click and drag it out. I can give it a size. Obviously that's too big, so we have to tell it how big. Before I do that, I'm going to draw another circle, sketch circle, and kind of drag out from that center line like that. One of the things I mentioned before were constraints. So a dimension is one way to constrain your sketch to keep it in place where you want it. You can also apply these constraints over in your sketch palette. So if I go down here, I want these circles, these holes to be the same size. So I will say equal, second from the bottom. I click on this equal icon, and I click on this circle, and I click on the other circle, and suddenly they're the same size. And I can kind of watch how that happens too. If I click on the edge of the circle and drag it, the other one matches it. Now I'll give those dimensions. Here, sketch dimension. Click on the edge of my circle. Come out here and click to place it. I don't know, we'll give that 1/8, 1/8 of an inch. That's too small, so I'll double click it. 3/16. I could measure mine, but I'm not going to bother right now.
Ben, is there a copy circle function? John's asking.
Yeah, so we can, there's different ways you can approach this. I could sketch one hole, one circle, and then mirror it, or I could extrude the hole and then copy it out a different way. There's not as much copy pasting in this as much as there is, like, you might create one feature and then mirror it or pattern it or duplicate it some other way. But I know that these circles are going to be, I guess I'm kind of losing my train of thought here, but yeah, you can copy and paste stuff, but that's generally not done as much in a sketch. You usually set up, I want it to be mirrored or patterned in some other way. But it varies depending on what you're drawing. So I'm going to give this, let's see here. So I'll do my sketch dimension. I'll click from the center of the circle, and I want to dimension it out from the center. Actually, here, I'll do center of this circle to the center of the other circle. Give them a distance apart. I don't know what that is. So we'll just key in 2 inches. The important thing to remember is that you can always come back and change these, tweak these sketches to make them the right size. And it's still off center, but like I can click and drag the circle now. Oh shoot, they aren't in line with my center, so it didn't actually put them in line with this. That's another constraint. We'll try to do this quickly so we don't drag it out too long, but I want this circle to be in line with this line. So I will say I want the center of this circle to be coincident. So that means this point is going to be coincident with this line. So it's going to be along the same line here. So I clicked coincident, I clicked the center of my circle, and I clicked this line, and it snapped it in there. And I'm still on the coincident tool, so I'll click the center of this circle, my line. And now I can hit escape to exit out of that tool. I can click my circles around, and now I can only drag them up and down. So that's sort of a clue that I'm getting close to a constrained sketch. Now I realize it's getting a little complicated, but apologize for that. Sketch line. I'm going to make another center line here, because I could put dimensions in, but I want to explain to Fusion that this should be centered. This doesn't have to be a construction line. It can leave it as a regular line, but I'll click construction line. And now, here we go. Another constraint down at the bottom of the list is called symmetry. I could do this by mirroring as well, but for now I'll pick symmetry, and I'll click this circle and the other circle, and then when I click the construction line, it's going to understand that that's the line it should be symmetrical over. And now it's snapped in place. I hit escape. I try to drag my circles around and they don't move, so I know they're fully constrained. We'll stop the sketch. And you can see the sketch here, the construction lines. I will go to create an extrusion. It's asking me what do I want to extrude. I'll click the top circle and the bottom circle. So those two circle profiles. Drag it out the back. Tell it that I want to go through all. And then just to finish it off, go to the modify menu here, and we'll give these what's called a chamfer. So instead of rounding over these edges, we're going to put a little chamfer, or better yet, it's basically a countersink. Now it's saying chamfer, select your edges. I'll select the front edge of this circle and the front edge of this hole, and then give it a distance to chamfer. I think I made that a 1/16. And it's chamfered that edge off, so we have a nice looking countersink there for our screws. Click OK. And we have a switch plate, or something close to a switch plate.
Right on.
Click Save. Okay, I felt like I had to rush through some of that. I didn't think I would feel limited by an hour time slot, but I appreciate you guys for following along with me. I wasn't able to watch the chat very closely, so thank you, Izzy, for that.
No, that's fine.
Anything you guys want to ask or
You
throw
have a
out?
couple questions, Ben? Is that cool?
Yeah, totally.
All right. If you guys have a few minutes here, let's go ahead and answer a couple questions. If you'd like to throw up some questions, we can answer those real quick, the best we can. We'll try to keep it to a bare minimum here as far as time. John Nesbitt asks, chamfering, can you change the chamfer by an angle? Can you tell the angle, what angle to be the chamfer to be?
The chamfer tool itself, I'm going to go down to my timeline here. There's the chamfer icon. Right-click and edit that feature. So, okay, yeah, here in the chamfer type, you can give it equal distance, or two distances, or distance and an angle. So you can really tailor that chamfer. So like one distance could be half an inch, and the other distance could be a 1/16, and now we've got a really shallow angle there. I'll cancel that. You can also do a draft angle on different surfaces to also give it sort of an angled appearance. But yeah, you can you do have some more control over the chamfer that way.
I would, you know, for those of you who are really seriously interested in getting this, and I'm assuming there's a bunch of you are, you stayed for the whole thing. It's like learning any program. It's just a matter of practicing a few keys at once. I always tell everybody, don't try to soak in too much at one time. Practice a few things at once. So I would encourage you guys, especially those of you who are just learning or just this is your first time being exposed to Fusion 360. We'll have a recording of this video available. I'm guessing by tomorrow afternoon sometime, and I'll put links in the chat area or in Facebook group, Toolmasters Facebook group, so you can come back and reference it. But I would encourage you to kind of practice just the basic tools that Ben went over today instead of, it's easy to get frustrated if you try to jump, into something and just try to grasp it all at one time. Just learn a few tools and take that time, and then the next step, you can, once you have those tools mastered or down well, you can move into the next ones, and it really it happens very quickly, a lot faster than you might think. And especially if you start small and learn those few tools and then step up to the next series of tools. And if you start small that way, before you know it, within a couple of weeks, you'll be blazing through, at least for the most part, you should be doing a lot of things that you want to do here with Fusion 360. So, Ben, thank you very much, very, very much. We've got a lot of great comments. A bunch of folks are saying great job. Andy Berkey says great job. A bunch of awesome classes. So thank you, man, very, very much. I appreciate you agreeing to do this. So.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
And I see there's a lot of comments scrolling by. I'd say if there's something you guys want to see or you have a question you want to throw out, maybe add a comment to the event in the Facebook group, and we can sort of pick away at those throughout the week.
Okay.
So if there's something you want to see next week, or you run into some issue or want to see something modeled, let me know. In the meantime, yeah, like as you said, play around, try extruding some shapes, cutting some holes, look for simple objects around your house that you think you could turn into a 3D model. Sometimes it helps to just have something in your hands that that you can turn into a 3D model. So.
Well, let me thank you for joining us today for this course, and let you know that we will have these up once a week as soon as the courses are over. As soon as I have time to go through and edit them real quick, I'll be posting them up on the page so you guys can come back and review them like I said at the beginning. Again, thank you to Ben Brandt, and I want to let you know if you guys have questions or concerns or ideas for classes, post them over on the Toolmasters Association Facebook page. We're always there interested in hearing what you guys have to say. And, we're definitely keeping an eye on the page, so either myself or Ben or Wes or a couple other folks will be keeping a very close eye on the Facebook page and can typically get to questions or concerns relatively quickly. So if you have questions, post them over there. Thank you guys very much, and we'll see you next week with another Fusion 360 course.